are Stephanie, Jonathan, Matt, Tony, Bill, and here comes another Matt. So do we have 6 chairs? We're good? Yeah? Okay, so this is how we're going to do it. Susan and Fran, where are you? You have note cards? Okay, note cards. Questions must be written down because I love you guys, but you tend to be really long-winded. So write your questions on a piece of paper. We will read them, and you can direct it to a specific state rep if you want to. Otherwise, these guys get along pretty well. You guys, you know who should answer what kinds of questions. We don't need all 6 of them answering every question because we won't get through anything tonight. We have about an hour. So we're going to start and y'all just pass that mic down, kind of talk, what are your key issues? Kind of don't introduce yourself because we know who you are, but let us know your priorities or, something. Okay? Good. We'll start. Yeah. Tony, you want to start? Okay.
State Representative Tinderholt out of Arlington. I dressed up for you tonight. If you have hard questions, ask them to Bill. No, I will author my abolition of abortion bill again. There was a lot of questions on whether we would take out the criminalizing a woman for the abortion. I got to be honest, we toyed with it for about a month, and I finally decided what was right. And what's right is if a woman is complicit and partakes in killing that unborn child, she should be held accountable for it. So we're not changing the bill. I know some people aren't happy about that, but that child is a child inside the womb according to state law and our Christian values. So that red light cameras are a big issue. A lot of people in Arlington want me to author the bill, but I really love Jonathan Stickland, and he's been at the forefront of that fight for a long time. So I'm going to work closely with Jonathan, and we're going to pass it this time. I really think it'll happen. Another thing that is going to be really important, I think, is going to be the speaker vote coming up. I think it's going to be the number one. I think it'll be the number one most important thing that we do is choose the right speaker at the beginning of session, and I would ask you guys to hold your representatives accountable for partaking in the caucus vote for the Republican nominee for the House floor vote. So.
Bill Zedler here. And when you said, when you got into, well, somebody's long-winded, I thought, us? Long-winded? No, I think my biggest deal this coming session, there's several things. One of the big mistakes we made in the past was we uncapped the tuition increases for the colleges and universities, and we need to recap them. And the other thing is that I'm sick and tired of our children going to colleges and universities in the state, funded by taxpayers, and they are, in essence, brainwashed into supporting socialism and that kind of stuff. And if we're going to start if we're going to have diversity in our colleges and our universities, we're going to have diversity of political thought, and mainly we're going to have something that reflects the philosophy of the people who are paying the bills, the taxpayers. And so those are mine. But the other thing is this, that one of my other big issues is that that right now there's still this debating back and forth as to whether the medical board can go into a doctor's office and have a warrantless search and in essence then get your medical records and take them down to the state and just kind of browse through them and stuff like that, hand them over to law enforcement if that's what they decide to do. And let me tell you, as far as I'm concerned, we need to put an absolute stop on that, and in essence says that they cannot get your medical records without either one of two things, your permission or a warrant.
Matt Rinaldi, District 115. I got to admit, I'm getting all hyped up now, and I'm very optimistic because Zedler went before me. When I came in, I was a little down. There were no handmaidens outside like last year protesting. Very disappointing. Bud Kennedy wasn't anywhere tweeting. If I missed him, please let me know you're here because it'll. Okay. No, I want to say I'm looking really forward to next session. We got to get through this election first, but I think next session is going to be huge, building on what we did last session. And I'm speaking as the first person up on this panel to be endorsed against by President Barack Obama. I just want to point that out. Mainly because it upset Stickland that I got it before he did. But going on to next session, listen, I think it's going to be very important. Next session is going to be a focus on property taxes. It's going to be a focus on capping the size of the state budget and the size of government. And of course, we're going to continue pushing for to increase your Second Amendment rights, to promote life. And we have big things in store, especially with the new speaker. I want to point out, we'll talk more specifically when you have questions, but with the new speaker, we can do so much more. With Governor Abbott, with Dan Patrick, with a new speaker, really the sky's the limit. I just got back from a legislator conference a few weeks ago, and all the legislators from the other states, all of the conservative legislators, liberty-minded legislators wanted to know, how did you do what you did last session? Because it's the first place they've heard of where it's actually worked, where a minority has opposed a House leadership that was going against the will of the people and actually was successful. I think we can build on that, especially when we have a House leadership that truly lets the body carry out its will. So looking forward to answering questions on specific issues and looking forward to representing District 115 again next election.
Yeah, Matt. I just don't want to strangle you, Stickland. You're not going to. Thank you. Hey, good evening, Matt Krause. It's an honor to be here with you all tonight. I'm really looking forward. So goals. Pre-November 6th, the biggest goal for me, and I think I would say kind of for everybody in this room, is to make sure Matt Rinaldi gets reelected. We're going to grow the Freedom Caucus, and I'm excited about that. But to me, losing him would be it would be crazy. I can't imagine. To me, he's the smartest person in the entire chamber, in the entire House and Senate. You put them all together, you talk about sheer brilliance, and Matt Rinaldi, to me, is the #1 person out of all those folks. So, so that's pre-November 6th. From November 7th to December 1st, the focus has got to be on speaker. I'm not so much concerned about a person. I'm more concerned about the process. I think we all agree about that, and the person will eventually come out of there. I think will be very open to conservative ideals, give us not only a seat at the table, but allow us to drive some of those conversations. So I'm excited about that. Then once we get into session, to me, property tax, not just reform, but relief. It does us no good if we just slow the rate that your property taxes are going up. What we need to do is find a way to actually bring those down. And so that's one of the things that our office is going to be working on. And then tangential issue after that, after all the big issues as well, but a big issue to me is the medically fragile children that we worked on a little bit last session. We'll come back. Hopefully we're going to help out that population as well. To me, that's a very pro-life issue, and I'm excited to be working with a lot of the folks in here and other places on helping those kids get the help they need. So those are some of my quick priorities real quick.
Jonathan Stickland, House District 92. #1 priority for me is to get constitutional carry going again. I think we've got a lot of momentum. We've got momentum on the other side of the building now too. I think that this is the year that we could go all the way. Like Tony said earlier, with Governor Abbott coming out against red light cameras, that is going to be a top priority for my office. We will also be bringing back our bill to end in-state college tuition for illegals. It's time to put Texans first in this state. It's time to turn off all the magnets that are attracting folks to illegally cross our border, so we need to take out every subsidy to them that we possibly can. And I'm super excited after this last week with Brett Kavanaugh being confirmed. I think it's time that we start talking about the 10th Amendment again. I want to get into the Supreme Court and overturn a lot of the crap that they've been putting down our throats and push back for states' rights.
Stephanie Klick, House District 91. One of the first things that I want to work on after we have our speaker vote is some reform to the House rules. This is a perfect time to make the process more open and fair, to do that and do that now. I think that if you've got 78 or 80 people that have signed on to a bill, it ought to come to the floor and not be bottled up without a hearing. So those are some things that I plan to work on. For those of you that know me, I'm a nurse, and I will be working on some more healthcare-related issues. I think we need pricing transparency so that you can be a better consumer and save money when you're purchasing, whether it be drugs or anything else. I am also going to work on, do we have any retired teachers in here? Great. I don't know whether you saw recently, but they changed the prescription drug program and actually saved $200 billion. And that also helped on your premiums for that. There's a lot more that we can do that would bring transparency and pricing. We need to do it more aggressively. Montana has done it. They've got a great model, and that's what I'm working on for next session.
Okay, so I'm just standing here looking at our stage, and you guys, this is like amazing. All these people are right here in our area. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for being here. I just want
Has nothing to do with this group here, I'll tell you that.
We're truly blessed.
Texans for Vaccine Choice, we will definitely remember you too this session.
Amen.
Okay, so let's just talk about what Matt started talking about, because we know everybody here wants to know who's going to be our speaker, and I know you don't have an answer to that, but can we just get that subject out of the way?
I can tell you who won't be speaker. That's probably a pretty easy answer right now. But I think you look at the Freedom Caucus and what we started at the end of the special session last year. And we said what we need to do is start to have a conversation before each session on who the Republican caucus feels like should be their nominee for speaker. We drafted a letter. We signed it. We said we want to call a meeting to discuss this. We were laughed at, ridiculed, said you'll never have anybody show up. You'll never get it done. Lo and behold, we showed up the last day of the special session. We had how many Republicans there, 90-something Republicans, including the speaker, current Speaker of the House at that meeting. They said, okay, that's great. Then we said, we're going to get together at the next caucus. We're going to move this forward. We're going to start a work group and discuss it more. I said, no, that'll never happen. You won't get enough people to come. Lo and behold, we had enough people show up. You unanimously said, let's do a work group. We came back later, said the work group had a recommendation that this is how we should go about the speaker nominee caucus process. He said, oh, it'll never happen. You won't get consensus. We ended up having unanimous consensus on how we're supposed to do it. So you think where we've come in just the last 14 months, it's incredible. And it was led by a lot of the guys and gals you see sitting here today. And so it's pretty incredible. And so what we're going to do December 1st, we're going to get together in a room. The Republican caucus is going to decide on their nominee. We're going to go through a process we've all agreed to. And hopefully from that, we're going to have a nominee that we can all support. If you don't support that nominee, I feel for you when you go back to the voters the next time around. But that's kind of the framework. That's where we're at. December 1st, vote for the GOP caucus nominee. Hopefully all the people will then go to the floor, vote for that person, and it'll be a done deal.
And I'll say this too, two things. Number one, the feeling in the Republican caucus has changed dramatically in the last year and a half, I would say. We had a Republican caucus retreat down just outside of Austin about a month ago. Yep. And, you know, typically at those events, I would say that the conservatives have always been the outcast, okay? Well, the ones who are kind of pushed aside, and they've got their own little group, the Good Old Boys Club and everything. That Good Old Boys group is there's still remnants of it, but their unity is gone. And it was a strange thing to go through, because now there's a ton of people who are in the middle of the Republican caucus who are just trying to figure out, how do I stay out of trouble, okay? They got their finger up in the air, and they're trying to judge which way is this going to go. And they clearly think that it's going to go our way, because we were the guys that they wanted to hang out with for the first time. And I know that sounds so petty and small, but I will tell you, this is such a social thing that we're going through. The remnants of the Strauss team at the same event they were the only ones who were miserable that entire time that we were down there. They were fighting with each other. There's like 4 of them that are running for speaker, trying to get all the same votes. They can't get there. I mean, just the mere fact that the next speaker has not been decided or announced is an encouragement. And what I think all of us have been, like Stephanie talked about, is, to me, how much power the speaker has is how much we give him. Because on that first day, they are elected to represent the same House district, the same number of people that we are. And then we all vote to give him the control that the speaker has had over the last couple of years. I want to make it to where the actual person is almost irrelevant, and that power is then brought back to the membership, so that we as individuals, as your representatives, have the chance to actually be your voice in Austin and don't have to play into the power structure. So that is why you haven't seen all of us rallying around a specific person yet, because right now the negotiations going on behind the scenes is, what is that person even going to be able to do? And that is the best discussion we should be having right now.
That's great. Okay. Anytime you guys need help in Austin, whether it's with the speaker race or anything you're pushing, please reach out to us. You know that, right? Okay, so if you need us December 9th to be there shouting, holding signs, we can do that. So,
The Democrats will tell you shouting doesn't always work.
Sometimes it's just fun. So, okay. This is a very, very generic question. Any one of you can take it. When are property taxes going to be fixed? And I really liked what Matt said about we don't want just reform, we want relief. So whoever wants it.
I'll start off and tell you, we hear local elected officials tell us all the time that they want to maintain control at the local level. You hear that all the time? Do you guys hear that? I don't know about you, but I tell the local elected officials that I agree that the lowest level of local control is the individual voter. And so that's you. And so if we go with the governor's plan, which I think that some level or percentage will end up happening this session, if they want to go over that, guess who gets to be the local control at that point? You do. And so I think that's going to happen this session. I don't know what is it at, 2.5 right now? I mean, Abbott's proposal is 2.5. Realistically, I could get smacked around for saying this. 4 or 6 could potentially happen. I'd like to see 2.5 as well, but I think something's going to happen this session.
Yeah, but in addition to the buy down, I think some of us are trying to get momentum behind an idea of actually buying down property taxes with state funds. And what a lot of people don't realize, our economic growth has increased the size of the budget by so much. I mean, when I first ran for office, we were talking about an $80 billion budget. Now we're talking about like $110 billion. So we're talking about huge increases in state funding. If we had put that towards buying down property taxes, your property tax would be 40% less. Right now, if we had done that the last 12 years. We actually would have no school maintenance and operation taxes, which is the bulk of your property taxes. So let's do that going forward. Let's make sure we're putting those surplus funds towards schools to buy down property taxes. The state share of school spending would go up. Robin Hood would be eliminated. It would solve about 3 problems at once. Currently, we are the highest we have the highest property taxes of any state without an income tax. So don't let them blame it on the fact we don't have an income tax. We have high property taxes because our local property taxes are out of control. And we need to do something about it.
I'll just add, too, that obviously being involved in the local elections is a huge part of property taxes. And for some of you in this room, that means that some of you are going to have to run for office yourself. I'm amazed constantly at some of these local elections that determine our property tax levels and how they are running with no opposition whatsoever. And then the people who do put themselves out there are often alone running a race all by themselves. So.
And to follow up on that, we've got George Dotson and Chris Putnam in the back, and they were elected officials and still are one of them in Colleyville, and they've done amazing things on the property tax issue, which just shows if you get the right people in the right positions, you can actually have an effect on it.
Okay, the next question is kind of related. What has to happen politically to achieve Robin Hood repeal and real school finance reform?
For the last question. Just what I was saying. I think that's what needs to happen. I mean, buying down school M&O property taxes with state money eliminates it and reforms our finance.
Always.
They would tell you behind my back.
Yeah, that's right.
I was at a educational forum with Stephanie. Was that last week? Yep, last week, and it was put on by the liberals, and all of our Democrat opponents showed up. And one of the things that kind of hit me while we were there at the forum was I made a comment, and there were gasps in the audience. And the comment that happens a lot, actually. But this one was interesting. And I think that we need to all understand what we're looking for, too. There is a process in this country, at least our founders intended it to be this way. It was a concept called voting with your feet, okay? And if you weren't happy with the way that one state did it or one city did it or whatever, the idea was you could move to another part and that we would have this entire country filled with a bunch of different experiments. And I think that it needs to be that way in education as well. I think we need to establish a baseline of what we want. You know, the bare minimum at the state level, our Constitution requires that. And then we need to have the local folks deciding what the differences between are going to be. And for those of us who don't like it, we either need to vote with our feet or we need to vote those people out of office. But I can tell you, I'm convinced that centralized government, especially on school finance and stuff, is very, very hard to achieve. You end up with things like Common Core coming down from the federal government and then kind of watered down versions that the state tries to pull out. We need to get these things back into the local level, and the parents need to take control of their kids' education.
We are all aware that today's millennials are flocking to socialism. Our colleges and universities have been taken over by leftist professors. My observation is that this political bias is trickling down into Texas K-12 public schools. What are the panel's thoughts about legislation that prevents educators from presenting political bias and providing punishment for violations?
How do you really craft that? I mean, just to be honest, I agree with the problem. It's just the solution, how do you craft that? I mean, I agree it's a problem. Listen, just today, if you look on Twitter, the school board president of Coppell ISD today was tweeting out communist propaganda from Noam Chomsky. I mean, and that's the person in charge of K-12 education. So yeah, it's a problem. And kids are not learning that socialism is bad. They aren't learning that capitalism has freed more people from poverty than anything else in human history. They aren't learning the greatness of our American experiment. How do you do it? I think you need to present more options for education. Why do we have a cap on charter schools? Why does a great charter school by my house have a 1,000-family waiting list? That's simply unacceptable. The best accountability system is the free market. It always is, providing choices, providing competition, because you can't have legislators take into account how to legislate somebody to do the right thing, because oftentimes we can't even figure out what the right thing is. But you guys know what the right thing is, and together, your purchasing power, your consumerism will eventually create a market for what we want. We can make education provide what we want, and we need to do it through competition.
Yeah, I agree, again, with Matt Rinaldi. But also, I think you have to worry about the unintended consequences, too. If you try to craft a piece of legislation that says if you teach something that is distasteful in some way, then you could be penalized for it. Well, politics is cyclical. One day, maybe if there is control by the other party, and then all of a sudden the views that we think are in the majority and that we think should be espoused, American exceptionalism, the heroes of the Alamo were heroic and they gave their life. All of a sudden, now is that going to be deemed offensive or outside the mainstream? And so you could be having people penalized for that. So you got to be very careful when you're crafting legislation like that you don't bring those kind of thoughts and kind of unintended consequences into what you're doing. I think the best thing to do is to make sure you still have oversight over the State Board of Education. You have input when we're doing the curriculum and all those things to make sure the outline and the basics that we're teaching our kids are those that we think represent what's great about Texas and America and all that stuff. And I think that's the way to do it. And then enforce that, make sure the teachers are teaching that in class. If not, you get rid of the teacher, put another teacher in that goes about that, but not necessarily punishes them if they say something you don't agree with.
Yeah, I have been politically involved a very, very long time, and I remember the days when Ann Richards was governor and Democrats ruled the state. and was very involved at that time regarding curriculum and textbooks. And some of the textbooks that I reviewed encouraged things like the goodness of planned death, and that abstinence, the effectiveness is unknown. Those textbooks were so political that a leftist could have put their name on them and ran for office. But when that happens at your individual schools, parents need to get engaged. They need to pay attention what their kids, the books that they're bringing home, what they're doing in the classroom. Ask questions. And if it's something that you disapprove of, speak out. Don't just sit there. Get involved.
I'll just add one little point. I think one of the I don't think we're going here with the question, but protecting homeschooling and keeping it unregulated and not messed with by anyone is so important. We've got to allow parents to have a way to get out of the system if we cannot fix it. And if you haven't noticed, there's a huge fight. The left is attacking us from a history standpoint. They're trying to remove our history, whether it's the Alamo. I don't know if y'all saw recently trying to change the defenders of the Alamo and take out the word heroic. I mean, they are attacking us from that point. I think it's important that we protect that too.
Why don't we go ahead then and address school choice? Is it going to come back, and how does that affect homeschoolers, and what are your stances on that?
I think that some legislators are really kind of fearful of it because teachers are very loud with their political agendas, but teachers shouldn't fear it either. If you look historically across the states that have done it, it really doesn't decrease pub ed enough for them to be impacted. But I think what you'll see is a bunch of bills that are going to address school choice directly, but in different ways. At the end of session, I think we saw some bills for handicapped children to have school choice. I think there's a lot of bills out there to try to get our foot in the door when it comes to school choice. But I'll tell you, I wish that educators, like my mother-in-law, for instance, who was a 38-year teacher in Arlington, who's totally converted now. She totally believes that school choice is really, truly the best choice and that it's the most functional way for education to go. I think you'll see a lot of bills like that. I don't know right yet if there's any other bills that are being authored, but I do know that we'll see a lot of those bills again, like from, didn't Simmons have some and Huberty had some? I think you'll see some of those.
I think in general, all of us like the idea of bringing competition to public schools. The details in this are so hard to navigate, y'all, because there are school choice bills that I believe, I'm convinced, are a huge danger to liberty and freedom. The devil is going to be in the details on this. So it's not that any of us are trying to dodge this question. I've seen school choice or voucher programs or grant program. There's a lot of different ways it's packaged. Some are very good for the state and some are worse than what we currently have. So everyone gets nervous when one of these bills comes to the floor because one little sentence could change something very good into something bad. So, but I think all of us like the idea of competition in schools.
We also have to be very careful that any proposal is not going to regulate private education in home schools. That's why the details of this are hugely important. We don't regulate private schools in Texas currently, but if we're not careful in legislation and how it's crafted, that could change. So it's hugely important. The devil is in the details.
Yeah, I think the other thing is for us to all understand the facts behind it and stuff like that. And I think there's about 25 studies that looked into school choice, and they never hurt public education. Okay, the question was, did they help the students? The majority of them did help the students. And I think as long as we're armed with the evidence behind it, then, we can do a whole lot more to make the argument. As far as I believe to make a more balanced view, I do think it's imperative that, for instance, we ought to be able to talk about the principles of free enterprise versus government-run top-down economies, and make a comparison, and in essence, require that to be taught. Just like I think in the past there was a deal that they had to present the, I've forgotten exactly how it was put, but the comparisons of evolution or something like that. And in essence, as long as both sides are presented, then in essence, I believe the truth will win out. It's only when they're able to stifle the information about free enterprise, limited government, and that kind of thing, or do they win? When they're required to show both sides, I believe the principles of free enterprise and capitalism and things like that will win out. In other words, people will understand it. I mean, I think Tony, I know I've been at UTA, and whenever there's Alan Sachs, the teacher at UTA, he'll allow us to come in, and typically that's what I talk about. I talk about what are the principles that made us the greatest country in the world, and one of the things I talk about is free enterprise, limited government, limited taxes. And when you talk to them, I believe most of the kids get it. The deal is they're starved for that information. And to me, the way to get around that is say, you're going to have to present that. It's just like if you look at a lot of the colleges and universities today, they don't teach Western civilization, historical context. They teach something else. And I believe what we've got to do is mandate those things be taught in a balanced view. So.
All right, we're going to move on. Okay. This one says it's to Jonathan. Does that make you nervous?
No.
No, why would it? So, okay.
I'll put it about 100.
When do we finally get the state of Texas to stop collecting union dues from state employees and passing the money on to, I don't know, I can't read it, something to donate to the Democratic Party?
So that has been a trick of the left. They've infiltrated the state of Texas where they're not allowed to unionize here, but what they have done is create political educational organizations that do exactly that. So in the state of Texas, there are certain groups that have the right to garnish wages from teachers and different groups to give money directly to these organizational groups. Some of them are actually codified in code as specific organizations. And so the problem has been is they have this free money. Teachers, when they first come in, or and I'm saying teachers, this is a lot of different groups, but they're told when they first are hired, oh, you need to do this. This organization will protect you. It'll give you insurance. It'll, all of this different stuff, none of which you actually need. Much of it is available for free. But they end up getting tens of millions of dollars cycled through, and then you see these organizations through their C4 activities doing things like pushing out, get out the vote with their list of here's our scorecard and pushing a left-wing propaganda. So one of the things we've wanted to do is say, hey, government doesn't have a role in managing your groups. If you want to collect dues from your people, you're going to have to go out and do it on your own. The state's not going to be your accountant and do it for you. It's kind of a de facto union. They have been going against every conservative piece of legislation for a while now. And it's time to end that practice in Texas. But I will warn you on this, because I'm actually convinced this is one of the biggest issues facing the state of Texas right now. We have got to include everyone all at once. There are going to be some groups in here that are going to be difficult to have included, first responders, different kinds of workers, who will all be lobbying down in Austin that, oh, well, you can do it to them, just cut us out, leave us here. We get one shot at this. It's got to be everybody. It's got to be all at once, and we got to get it done. Because if we do half of them or one section of them, you will never see that bill on the floor again. So I hope that makes sense.
Did you already say who you think might have that bill?
That was a top priority of the governor, Governor Abbott last session.
Never got to the floor of the House.
Yeah. Why? Strauss.
Recurring theme. Okay. What will or can be done to stop them from moving the cenotaph before session and then to permanently stop it from being moved?
that's all you.
Well, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of negotiations going on right now about the only idea that I know of that, because right now it's under the property of the city of San Antonio, and they get to make the decision where they go. Obviously, the GLO and the state are negotiating and working with them, but it seems like that's been one of those points that the GLO said, okay, we'll move it to this place, we'll put 24/7 security around it, we'll make sure that it's kept up in a nice environment and all that. And so it seems like they understand that the city of San Antonio gets to dictate a lot of what's going on there. So short of a lawsuit, which I actually think there has been a lawsuit filed, that's probably the only way you could stop it before session. During session, kind of like a nuclear option would be for the state to use eminent domain to take over the property. And I don't know if you do it through the GLO, I don't know if you do it through TxDOT, I don't know who you would do it through, but that is an option out there that I've heard at least conceptually talked about, that the state could take over the cenotaph, and then you could actually, then it's under our purview, and we could move it wherever we wanted to. So is that going to happen? I don't know. Right now, what I do know, the master plan says that the cenotaph will be moved over ways. It'll be renovated. There will be names added to it. It'll be restored. It'll be moved. It'll be under 24/7 security. It will be a place of honor and respect for those people. But I know a lot of other people, I believe Maggie, would disagree that that's the right thing to do. So, but that's where it stands right now. I'm not sure what you can do, honestly, short of either a lawsuit or using eminent domain. But as long as the city has control over that property or it owns the cenotaph, I think that your options are very limited.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important historical sites in Texas. And if that means using eminent domain to do it, I think that's exactly what we should do. And so the fact is, we should not be allowing people that are driven by political correctness to, in essence, tarnish this site. But I think the main concern with everybody, they move the cenotaph. Oh, we're going to have to move it in here to, fix it up, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, it stays there, and over a period of time, everybody just forgets about it. So,
I'll just say, if we stop and think about what's really happening here, and there's a handful of people who are literally trying to act like these people never existed and what happened did not happen. It should anger each and every one of us from every angle. I don't care what you believe. We're trying to erase the existence of individuals who I think did something incredible. So beyond just eminent domain, I'm not convinced it needs to be in the hands of the GLO either. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, this one's somewhat related, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but do you support removing the Confederate plaque in the Capitol along with Governor Abbott, or would you leave it up to something historical context? You guys, you got to write neater, okay?
I do not support removing it.
Well, I think our history needs to be accurate. I think we need to make sure that we're putting things in a right context. I talked to somebody the other day who said, I don't want to remove it, even though I think it's inaccurate. What I do want to see is another plaque added to it that adds historical context and maybe a more accurate portrayal of what happened. And so I do think we've got to have our history. There's no reason to tear down our history because we need to know that, whether it's positive or negative, however you feel about it, we need to know where we've been. And once we start tearing that down, it makes it a lot easier to get away from the foundations of what we had, but I do think it needs to be accurate, so we should always strive to do that.
We good? Okay. Although Lieutenant Governor Patrick called... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Let me add one other thing to that. Don't forget, there is a huge monument that is in honor of the Confederates that were killed in the war, as you if you're walking out of the Capitol, it's off to the left, or as you're coming up towards the Capitol, it's to the right. And I mean, that is one huge monument. And the question is, okay, are we going to tear it down? Because from my standpoint, I'm the oldest guy here, and I can tell you that I never remember this being an issue. Okay, but basically, it's just like I graduated from Lamar High School in Houston. We used to be the Lamar Redskins. Then they changed that. And all this, we got to remember, a lot of this is driven by political correctness. And so I believe that, I agree with Matt, we need to have it presented accurately and that kind of thing. But my concern is we start tearing down these, and pretty soon, you know, they've already brought it up. Well, we need to tear down the Jefferson Memorial because Jefferson owned slaves. Well, how about the Washington Monument? Tear that one down too because, you know, he was a slave owner. It's, yeah. No.
I was just going to say this is a very passionate issue for Representative Zedler because a lot of these guys in the statues he grew up with. Yeah. And they need to be respected.
That's right.
Okay, next question. Although Lieutenant Governor Patrick called for an end to the red flag laws in the school safety bill, there are still some controversial components to the bill, for example, mandatory storage and psychological evaluations. Any plans to stop this bill? And you might tell people what the red flag laws are.
Well, the red flag laws are, differ from state to state, but it's effectively getting a court order to have a person relinquish their guns because of either a mental issue or something else. That seems to be going nowhere. The other components, and there isn't a bill yet, it was a proposal, and it was a very comprehensive proposal by the governor. That was actually a very good proposal in general. Not that, you know, every point of that is meant to come to fruition, but it's a starting point for the discussion. And the other components were gun storage laws. I think the red flag laws aren't going anywhere. I think the gun storage law component, we're not going to enact a law that further restricts Second Amendment rights. However, we currently have in law a very, very restrictive gun storage law that actually needs to be changed to make it better. So if we can address that and actually make it more favorable to gun owners. Currently, the gun storage law holds you liable effectively if a child's in the backyard basically plinking and hurts himself. It's a very restrictive gun storage law. What the governor's proposal did was increase the penalties. Effectively, if the child causes bodily injury with the gun, such as in a school shooting. If we took out if we basically narrowed the law that we currently have, we can make what now is a very problematic law a lot better. But I wouldn't support anything that further restricts gun rights. I would support a proposal that makes our current gun storage law better because it's a bad law right now.
Yeah, and I'll say to Governor Abbott's credit, we were in a meeting with him a couple of months back, Matt, and you brought that up to him, and he and his staff were very open to that. I mean, so it's not, it was a 44-page proposal that he put out for the school safety plan. Like Matt said, there's a lot of good in there, but on that gun storage safety part, it's not like he's dug in and got his heels in. He's listening, and he's trying to make the law as good as he can. Matt actually had a great idea, and his staff and himself seemed very open to it.
And let me just say, just so you all know, this is a little inside behind the scenes. The Freedom Caucus, okay, so this 44-page document comes out from the governor on school safety stuff right after the shooting, if y'all remember. There was some stuff in there that they were just trying to have a conversation about. 5 tweets later from the Freedom Caucus members, you would think that the whole place was on fire. And a lot of these battles that were a huge concern were won behind closed doors at some of these meetings you've heard at. So I think it's kind of, I don't know if I can speak for all of us, but it's been kind of funny to go through and realize the political influence the Freedom Caucus has gained in such a short time. And I literally think that's because every single one of them understands it's not just a handful of legislators, it's the people who are behind those legislators that they need to be afraid of. So the one thing I will put on your radar that has scared me, that kind of goes outside of these bounds a little bit since I'm kind of the gun guy, is there's a talk about making the public schools put in kind of I'm calling it a tattletale system, where if you're worried about somebody, that they can go and anonymously complain about a student they're worried about, and then an investigation of some sort could be launched into that kid. All I need to do is look at CPS and the way that those anonymous complaints have ruined people's lives and realize that we should not put that ability in a 14 or 15-year-old's hands and turn that school or another kid upside down anonymously. So I'll be fighting that.
Okay. What will be done to stop CPS from removing children that should not be removed and to ensure parents' rights are protected?
We made some efforts last session in trying to reform the system. We had different definitions of abuse and neglect in different areas of the code in different programs. There's still more work to be done. This week alone, I've gotten 2 phone calls from individuals that were put under a child safety plan that probably should not have been. Their children were in no way harmed. So there's still more work to do in that area.
One of the other things, and I got this from Alex Kim, so I'll give him credit for it. Are you still here, Alex? No. Oh, okay, there you go. He thinks just like right now, a police officer is required to give you your Miranda rights. Parents should be told about their rights when CPS comes to the door. The other thing is, I'm personally believe that something needs to be done to hold CPS or any other elected officials, or I'm sorry, not we are held accountable by y'all, but any people within the bureaucracy accountable when they violate the law. I can tell you this right now. I see stuff done on the medical board today that is frightening, that you wouldn't expect to see in the Soviet Union. And yet, there's nothing that can be done to hold them accountable. And I believe that the same thing needs to be done throughout these various agencies, where if they violate statute or that kind of thing, that they can be held accountable up to and including fines and jail time. So,
I think it's important too. People forget. We need to know. We need to know when this stuff happens, because I find out after the fact that something happened 3 months, 6 months later. I'm confident that the people at this table, if they know something is potentially unethical is happening and that someone's children are being taken away that shouldn't be, we will intervene at the proper level or the proper involvement level. But if we don't know, we can't help you. So we always think about things from a legislative standpoint, and I'll tell you, Representative Stickland and I did something about 2 weeks ago that was the same way. When we find out about things in our community, we will go out and get involved and try to rectify it before it becomes more of a problem. So think about it from a legislative standpoint, and to contact your legislator so that we can try to rectify it and fix it and hold those people accountable for doing what's right.
Hey, and gut check real quick for all of us on a personal level. The church should be stepping up and handling most of these problems. Communities and families should be handling most of these problems, and it should never be part of the government's responsibility to be involved at all, which means all of us are going to have to take a little more personal responsibility for ourselves and those around us. I've been thinking about that a lot lately as we fight to limit government and pull stuff back. These problems are still going to exist. Bad things are still going to happen. And we're up here fighting to give all of us the opportunity to take responsibility for those things ourselves instead of the heavy hand of government. So we need to be ready for it.
That's great. Okay. According to recent studies by Pew and Yale, it's likely we have upwards of 800,000 illegal aliens in DFW. We have a Tarrant County sheriff who readily draws blood from DWI suspects. Meanwhile, his deputy told this audience they are scared to ask whether someone is a U.S. citizen. With Trump in office, how can you empower local governments to help identify and remove illegal aliens?
I want to set the record pretty straight, because the sheriff's a very close friend of mine. I'll tell you, he's not afraid to do the right thing. And when you know that there's a deputy that's afraid, you need to make sure he knows that that's happening, because our sheriff stands tall and strong on those detainers and has no fear in doing the right thing. I just want to make sure that people know that it's not indicative of the Sheriff's Department as a whole.
Well, I mean, we passed the strongest sanctuary city law in the country last session and effectively made it illegal to ignore immigration detainers. We put actual teeth behind the bill in enforcement. So an amendment I actually tacked on the sanctuary city bill made it such that if a sheriff is enacting a sanctuary policy and refusing to honor immigration detainer requests or not refusing to coordinate with federal immigration officials, they can be removed from office. And not only can they be removed from office, but the Attorney General brings the action to remove them from the office, and you guys make the complaint. So literally, if you're in a jurisdiction where any elected official is enacting a sanctuary policy, you can make a complaint to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General has to take action to remove that official if he finds that they're actually enacting a sanctuary policy.
Yeah, and I'd say too, you know, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. What we need to do is secure the border, right? I mean, that's the initial choke point for stopping all of these issues in the first place. And honestly, I feel like now that we have a Republican in the White House and Republicans in the Congress and Senate, Texas should not be having to pay $800 million for border security, because the government does so many things that are outside the scope of the Constitution and what they're supposed to do. This is actually one we all agree that they are supposed to be doing. And so I think we need to make sure our federal officials are doing their job and securing that border. We always talk about building the wall. Actually, I would like to build the wall up north and keep everybody from California and Illinois and New Jersey from coming in. But if we're going to do that, we'd have special visas for guys like you. But what we need to do is secure the border, and that'll stem a lot of this. And so we need to keep pressure on our federal government officials to do that. If they don't, Texas has the right and the responsibility to secure our border ourselves, but we shouldn't be having to do it. We fought for 8 years against the Obama administration to do that. We railed against them, criticized them for not doing it. We need to hold our federal officials to the same level now that we did then if they're not getting the job done.
Also, here's a fun thing you can lobby your congressman for that isn't really an issue right now. But actually, if you really want to empower the state to enforce immigration laws and to help protect our border, what you can do is have them remove federal preemption from the immigration laws in terms of penalties. Because currently, we can't impose criminal penalties. We are very limited in the amount of things we can do. All it takes is an act of Congress. We have a Republican president, 2 Republican houses. Call your congressman.
I want to be very clear, too, about this issue. Overseas, anyone here in the military formerly? Spent time in the military? We watch America's sons and daughters die protecting other countries' borders. So I want to be very clear. We're humanitarian. We don't wish ill will on these folks that came over here illegally, but they're costing you billions, and in the nation probably trillions of dollars. And so we don't want them hiding in the shadows. We just want them to come here legally. It's really simple. We're a nation of laws. Follow the law, and I do not, for anything in the world, I do not understand the left's mindset in wanting to not enforce a law that's a standing law. So we don't want them to hide in the shadows. We want them to be here legally, and I just want to make sure you guys understand that, because message gets out from meetings like this on things we say. We don't wish ill will on these folks. We really don't. Do it legally. Do it the way that people come into our country legally. Y'all are taxpayers. Sometimes they have more rights than you do, and that's pretty sad.
I think the other thing is that the left always likes to talk about, well, the poor illegal immigrant and stuff like that. Well, they do that. They use that just like they say, oh, we're gonna defend women. Oh, you mean, in other words, if they accuse you of sexual assault, we need to believe them, unless you charge a Democrat with sexual assault, then we don't believe them. So it's not, make no mistake about it, it is not about women's rights, and it's not about illegal immigrants. Because here's the thing, What we got to remember is, in order for them to get here, very often they're either doing one of two things. They're paying the drug smugglers to get them here, and then the other thing is there's a huge percentage, especially of women, that are being raped on the way up. And why are they willing to take those chances? Because they believe that once they get here, they can stay. And so what we got to do is understand that very often these people are taken advantage of as well as the fact, because they think they can get here and stay, as well as the fact that if the borders are open to that, they're also they're open to illegal drugs, they're also open to human trafficking, all the other issues that are bad. And so this is not simply a deal of whether we're going to be accepting of people who are here illegally. It is what it is in a nutshell is this. It is not fair to the people who have been waiting in line and doing it right for us to have some people cutting in line. So, thank you.
Okay, we can move on. Okay. This is a question for you, Bill, and I just want to give you a heads up that I think you're being set up. I just want you to remember where you're at. Okay? Tell us the truth. Is Texans for Vaccine Choice your favorite group to work with? This is Northeast Tarrant Tea Party, by the way. Okay.
Let me tell you, they are wonderful. They have done a phenomenal job down there, and so I am one of their biggest fans.
That was a real political answer.
They just come to my office and drink all my coffee.
That's why I had to step up my coffee production and stuff like that. I wanted to be number one.
Okay. How come the Texas power grid hasn't been hardened against nuclear, EMP, or solar Carrington event?
Yeah.
I don't know that word, Carrington.
That's
Okay.
my bill, if you guys didn't know. I've authored it 2 sessions in a row, and I don't think it should be a study. A really weak version got played around with last time. I'll tell you, after spending 21 years in the military, I'll tell you that the power grid in Texas is at risk, and it's at risk from mainly 3 different sources. All of them are potentially imminent at some point. Without going into tons of detail, I'll tell you that if we lose our power grid, it could potentially take 2 years to get our power grid back up. The good news is this: there are devices out there, there are things that already exist that can protect our power grid. We estimate that it could be between $2 and $6 billion, a lot of money, $2 to $6 billion to secure the grid in Texas. Another really nice fact is that about 86 to 80% of Texas's power grid is owned by Texas. So we're in a unique situation to secure, no other state, they all cross borders. I think it's really important. It's one of my top priorities. I think it's really important. Low estimates are 50%, high estimates are 90% of the people in Texas would potentially die within the first year if we lost our power grid that way. And make no doubt about it, Iran and North Korea both have battle plans to attack our power grid. We've had ships up at the coast running dry runs to launch weapon 37 miles above the earth to explode it over Texas and take out our power grid. There's natural things that are about 10 years past due that would cause it. And then there's small devices that cost about $300 that they could take 100 different people across the state and go take out our power grid. I'm trying to keep it short, and I'm telling you it's super, super important. It's kind of expensive, but I think overall our infrastructure, our job is to protect life, liberty, right? Part of protecting life is protecting this power grid, and it's our economy. I'm going to fight for that bill again, and we'll continue to fight for it. It's really important.
And I think it's important to point out that that's another case of a very important bill that we could not get to the floor of the House.
Well, I will add to that. I do think it's important that we harden those things, but even if you harden the grid and those generators and all that, you still could have potential EMP problems if an EMP comes, right, Tony? I mean, because you think about everything that's connected to that grid, what our cars are electronics, how are you going to get to the grid to work on it? The pipelines go on electricity, so how's that going to be affected? So I agree, we've got to harden it. We worked on it for 3 sessions. Tony and I have worked on it for a couple of sessions together. It can't just be be about hardening those generators to make sure they're not susceptible to EMP. It's everything else as well. So you kind of have to have a holistic approach to that, but it is vitally important. I completely agree with Tony.
Okay, I want to know what you're doing. That's kind of a rude way to say it, but how about what can we do for our veterans who very often come home with the disability of PTSD? Many wind up in prison. PTSD ruins our veterans' lives. Our police must be educated to help the veterans in jail.
I'm a veteran, 21 years, combat veteran. We have done things. Right here in Tarrant County, I went and watched Chuck Vanover, Judge Vanover's Veterans Court. It's phenomenal. They get a second chance. They have to pre-qualify. There's some steps they have to go through to pre-qualify. I'm a firm believer that people make mistakes in life. Sometimes it is because of their PTSD that they have. But we've already done some things. But we also have to remember that there are victims to crimes. And so there are times where they won't qualify or they can't go and participate in that Veterans Court because the victim may not want them to. The victim wants the person punished. But I think there's things that we've done for veterans across the state. If you think there's some more things that we could do, I'm open to listening to them. But not all crimes are victimless, and part of the process has to be involving the victim as well.
I think the other thing that we can do, and like, for instance, there was a bill, and I don't know if it actually made it through both houses or not, but it basically, there was good evidence that hyperbaric chambers helped those that suffer from PTSD. And so, but some people, well, we want more evidence or something like that. You know what? If it helps even a small percentage, the cost is so insignificant compared to having a person who's basically perhaps unable to function because they do suffer from PTSD. We ought to go ahead and do it. And so the money that we spend to help people overcome this problem, I think we ought to go ahead and get engaged and fund those programs, because it's just too important to allow medical approaches to this to simply languish because somebody wants more and more evidence to do it.
Okay, so we haven't really talked much tonight about pro-life issues, and I know we've got Matt as the pro-life whip, and Stephanie has the medical background, and Tony, you've got a bill that you've already talked about a little bit tonight. What can we expect this session in terms of what might be presented, pushed for, that sort of thing?
I'll be brief on my side. Y'all know my abolition of abortion bill. The governor told a young boy that passed away last month, pledged to pass, to abolish abortion in Texas. I don't know what that means. I really don't. I'm trying to get a meeting with the governor. But here's what you can expect from your legislators in Austin. You can expect us to do a Hail Mary, throw the ball to the end zone, and pass a bill like mine. And I think you can also expect us to vote for bills that are incremental and try to move the ball into the end zone to save as many children as possible. And I think that could be 5 bills, it could be 50 bills. I'm going to vote yes on every single one of them to stop even one child from being murdered in the state of Texas.
So 2 other important pieces of legislation I want to draw your attention to as well. One will be the Preborn Non-Discrimination Act, which is what was called the Schaefer Amendment. It was actually narrowly defeated because some Republicans actually voted against it. Currently, our 20-week abortion ban doesn't apply in the case of fetal abnormality that is incompatible with life. Whatever that means. That's the legal language. But I can tell you.
What that could include? So they understand.
Well, I'll give you one example that there's a lot of things it could include. I'll give you one thing it definitely includes. For example, like anencephaly and trisomy 18, where the child is most likely not going to live very long after birth. My wife and I lost a child 2 years ago at birth, and we're in a group called MEND, which is a mother's group who've lost children, and we have several mothers in that group who've lost children to anencephaly and trisomy 18. One in particular lost 2 children to anencephaly, a friend of ours. And she would never trade that few weeks she had with her children for the world. But currently, we allow that child to be killed even at 40 weeks. It's not subject to the 20-week abortion ban. So that's going to be one of the bills that we're going to be passing. The second bill is, I passed an amendment on the budget to defund Planned Parenthood and its affiliates. The bill that would make that effectively permanent did not pass. That was one of the governor's, on the governor's special session call, but it didn't get through the House. Surprise. So that's going to be coming up again. So what we'd like to do is defund Planned Parenthood permanently on a state level and also defund Planned Parenthood on a local level as well, so that cities like Austin can't pump money into abortion clinics.
Just want to add one thing on the pro-life deal that is now close to me and Tony's heart a little bit more. We got a call a couple of weeks ago. Y'all might have seen it on the news. There was a 9-year-old girl in Fort Worth who had some medical complications, and she stopped breathing, and they called 911. Hospital showed up. They revived her after a while and had her on a ventilator to keep her going, got her to Cook Children's. Within 48 hours later, Cook Children's had decided that they were going to pull the plug on the girl and end her life. The funny thing about this case was a couple of things. Number one, they were in their full legal right to do so. Our end-of-life laws in Texas are horrible. It's something Stephanie Klick has been fighting for many, many years. But the thing that scared me the most about this case was you had a set of parents who had a lawyer, they had full insurance, and they had no rights whatsoever. They were approached by the doctors, and I will tell you, Cook's has actually been great once we got involved, but they have been doing the right thing since. They asked, would you like for us to do a test to determine if there's any brain activity or not? And of course, the parents said yes. Once you have that test, and if any doctor anywhere, no matter what the tests are, and there's 5 or 6 different tests that can determine this, some are better than others, once you say yes to that and they do that test, you lose all your rights once you have been determined to be brain dead, okay, or not have the brain activity. So you had 2 fully capable parents right here in our backyard who could not keep the hospital from pulling the plug on their daughter, couldn't get another opinion, and at the time they were refusing to sign off on a transfer to another hospital, even if their insurance was going to pay for it, which they were. This should scare every single one of us, and it's something that we need to change in Texas.
And I'll piggyback that and tell you that I believe they were given about 2 hours notice to do that. Is that about right?
2 hours, yes.
At about 10, they were told that they were going to pull the plug at noon. I was notified at about 10:50, and I was at the hospital about 10 minutes before noon, and 2 legislators stopped it from happening, and it was worth it. It was they're in a fight right now, but that time that family's got it makes me tear up a little bit. The time the family has with that child, if they decide at some point, they get to the point where they decide that they want to terminate the life of this child because there's no brain activity. I think that part of the process is for them to grieve and understand and make the decision on their own if it comes to that. And it was really nice in a bad situation to be able to be a part of giving that to their family.
But it's scary because when Tony says the 2 legislators were able to stop it, the only reason we were able to stop it is because we went up there and they were scared of the PR, to be honest with you. Because they were legally in their bounds to do what they were doing. And Cook's, I don't want to slam on Cook's because they have worked with everybody, but this is just a normal everyday thing for them. And you'd be surprised how many calls we get, Stephanie, how many hundreds of cases. This is not an uncommon thing. This one stings a little bit more because it's a beautiful 9-year-old little girl. But this happens all the time in Texas.
I'll reiterate, too, that Cook's was really good about the whole process because legally they had the footing to be able to do it. So we're not trying to slam Cook's. What we're saying is the law needs to be changed because it shouldn't be to where they can give you 2 hours notice to take your child.
Parents should have rights.
Yeah, and let me add one other thing, because I think this is what's important. We need to understand that when the value of some human life is diminished, the value of all human life is diminished. And the other thing is this. Make no mistake about it. You know, it's just like I've had people that would say, you know, I'm not a single issue voter. And my philosophy is, oh, yeah, you are. It all depends on the issue. And I'll give you a prime example. Back in 1990, there was a guy named David Duke who was running for the U.S. Senate from the state of Louisiana. And, you know, then all of a sudden it came out that David Duke used to belong to the Ku Klux Klan. Now he belonged to the National Advancement of White People. And as soon as that came out, you know, nobody asked what was David Duke's position on foreign affairs, what was his positions on domestic affairs or taxation. They scratched him off the list because David Duke was a racist. Now here's the real problem, though. The number of people who would never vote for a racist, but who would turn right around and vote for someone who supports abortion on demand. When the fact is, the philosophy of human life behind that of a racist and that of the person who supports abortion on demand is identical. The fact of the matter is, the racist believes in the relative value of human life, and the abortionist believes in the relative value of human life. The racist is based on your race, your creed, your national origin. The person who supports abortion is based on whether you're wanted or not. For the unborn child is wanted, or the person who's aged or whatever it is not wanted or is wanted, they have value. But if they're not wanted, they have all the value of used Kleenex. And what we need to understand is that the same basis for human life that's embraced by the racist is also embraced by the person who supports abortion on demand. And I know all the Democrats would gasp at that, but the fact of the matter is that's the case. We need to get that message out, because here it is in a nutshell. If you look at the very basis of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger was their founder. The fact of the matter is that Margaret Sanger was a racist. She believed that minorities were human weeds, and we need to do away with human weeds. And so that's why she started Planned Parenthood. And that's why you also find Planned Parenthood in the middle of minority communities. So, you know, we all need to get that message out to our friends who say that they're not single-issue voters and that kind of thing, and say, yeah, you are.
I know we're dwelling on this, but I'd be remiss to not mention something when we were at the hospital. Kylene Wright and Joe Poyman weren't there with us. Texas Right to Life was. They were standing. Texas Right to Life was standing right there with us, sweating bullets, waiting for responses, hugging the family, going behind closed doors, advising, finding a hospital for them to go to. They did more work than we did. And so I just want to make sure people know that Joe Poyman, Kylene Wright wouldn't have been there, wouldn't have cared. Texas Right to Life was, and I tip my hat to them.
That's fantastic. Okay, so today I was at an event with Vice President Mike Pence, and there was a guy that I was talking to, and he kept name dropping, like he knows this congressman and he knows this congressman, and I completely was not impressed, because when I mentioned like Stickland and these people up here, he had no idea who they were, and I'm like, I don't care about what's going on in D.C. because we're never going to change what goes on there, but we absolutely can change what happens in Texas, and these are the people doing it. So I want to thank each of you for being here today, and would you all thank them too?